My topic today is our greater yet to be. And what I'd like to do is just to give you a little bit of context about the constructs that I'm going to be using and the constructive frameworks that my talk is going to be around. One, I'm not going to be describing it as science and duality. It's no judgment against the conference or what's happening here. But I don't want to set up a duality between science and non-duality, that it's all one thing. And I'm looking at science not so much as science and non-duality, but the science of non-duality. That the way that the universe is organized, that there is a unitary presence that's there. And what science does is it helps us to codify that. It helps us to see it, but it's not something separate from it. You're probably not going to hear me use the term non-duality because I don't want you focused on what it's not. We're going to focus on what it is. That the non-duality is really a state of oneness. So you'll hear me use the term oneness and synonymous with non-duality. You'll also hear me use the word wholeness, just slightly different nuances on that. When I'm speaking of the oneness, I'm speaking of that unitary presence, that energy field, that consciousness that manifests itself into substance out of which we all come. One unified, unitary field. However, within this oneness, there's also a wholeness. And the wholeness is a place of integration. It's a place where it's all brought together. You'll see me moving from the micro to the macro because they are the same thing. It's just a difference of gradation and scale. And I find that too often we treat these principles that we speak of as though they are different for different circumstances and different in regards to size. So I might say, well, yes, I can use this principle for my health. Oh, but this is the mortgage. Or, yeah, this might work for interpersonal relationships, but what about politics? Okay. And what I would ask you to do is the moment that you start to hear yourself say, but, you know, we're getting into non-duality. We're getting into the duality. That the moment you are taking any of the principles that you know and looking for exclusions, looking for places where it doesn't work, then you're training yourself to get into duality. Instead, we want to look at the and. The and. How does it all, in fact, come together? That being said, our greater yet to be. Our greater yet to be. You know, I want us to come at this like scientists do, in the sense that scientists are explorers. Scientists are willing to question what it is that they think that they already know. Scientists are willing to admit ahead of time that no matter how much it is that we think that we know, there's always more to be known. And a willingness, even if it's painful at times, to kind of pry our fingers off the constructs, to pry our fingers off the paradigms, to pry our fingers off the preconcepts that we have known before. Because there is this expectation that as we mature, as we grow, we're going to learn more. I want us to apply that same kind of open-ended, adventurous spirit to who we are as a species. That no matter how much it is that we think that we know about ourselves, we don't know it all yet. I find it interesting that when people want to talk about human nature, they'll go to the past. They'll go to how they think civilizations were in the beginning. They'll go to their concept of Darwinian theory. They'll go back to the most Neanderthal ways in which human beings showed up as the evidence of what is human nature. as opposed to what we do in science, where we're always looking forward. We're always looking to what else hasn't been discovered yet. What other capacities are there? What other potentialities are there? So I'm not saying anything that's going to negate where we've already been, but what I am saying is that if we are going to experience our greater yet to be, we have to let that go. We have to be willing to have, the Buddhists call it beginner's mind. Beginner's mind. Jesus in Scripture is quoted as saying, you have to come as a little child. Not in an immature way, but with this adventurous exploratory of who are we and what really are our capacities. This wholeness, this unitary presence, this way that we are so much more than what it is that we think that we are. When I spoke last year, my topic was non-duality, the inconvenient truth. The inconvenient truth. That I personally am not here to simply theorize. I am here to help ignite us and to inspire us some to act like we know what we know. Because if there really is all of this non-duality, why don't our lives look like it? If we really believe that it's all one, that the planet is one, and that we are all one, why don't we act like that? Why don't we act like that in our everyday lives, and why are we not organized that way? I have this series out called Letters from the Infinite, published by Sounds True. And I get these incredible downloads. They're in the form of a letter. And there's another volume of this that I'm working on, I'll call it, that's just definitions. Definitions of these spiritual qualities, these scientific principles that we speak of that are really the essence of our existence and the essence of our very beingness. And I love the way that it described wholeness. Wholeness. It describes wholeness as the place where our presence resides in unencumbered integration. Where our presence abides. Where our presence abides in unencumbered integration. I thought that was just juicy. Our presence, everything about us abides. We have a residence, but I contend that we don't really live in our residence. We go there, we eat there, we sleep there, we change clothes there, we bathe there, we have our stuff there, and we do all that kind of stuff. But most of us are outside of our residence more than we're inside of it. So on a day-to-day basis, we're really like living someplace. We're abiding someplace. And this abiding is us. It's like where we dwell. Where we dwell. We take us with us wherever it is that we go. So where does your presence abide? Does your presence abide in Facebook? Does it abide in the dramas and the troubles du jour? Does it abide in your work? All-consuming? Where is this that the totality of your being is in? I like this idea of an unencumbered integration. Unencumbered. To me, that's the biggest problem right now, is that we are too encumbered. We're too encumbered. We are saddled. We are strapped with trauma. We are strapped with bigotry and biases. We are strapped with all kinds of institutionalized ways of being that don't reflect our oneness. We are encumbered with too many things that are liens upon us. I used to be a lender. I used to be an institutional lender in real estate with Prudential in Los Angeles. So this idea of an encumbrance, I really get it. The most popular encumbrance that we know of is a mortgage. Okay? And what a mortgage basically says is that there's a lien. It's not free and clear. You may hold the title, but somebody else has the deed. You can't just do anything with it. You got to pay up. You got to pay up. And there's a way in which we have allowed our very beingness to become encumbered. The debt, so to speak, isn't just a financial debt. There's emotional debt. There's psychological debt. There is societal debt. And what we have to do is we have to learn to unencumber ourselves so that we can experience our integration. This integration is, in fact, a wholeness. The root of the word integration is integer, which means whole. Remember in math, the counting numbers, 1, 2, 3, 4. No fragments, no fractions. This place of integration is when all of us, all of our complexities, not just the contradictions, but where all of our complexities are coalescing into some kind of a sense of an order. An order. Because this unitary wholeness that we have has a space for all of it. It has a space for all of it. And part of this encumbrance that we have that prohibits us from experiencing our greater yet to be is that we're living in duality. We're living in duality. We're living in duality even when we say we're living in non-duality. I remember last year when I was here, I was using Martin Luther King Jr.'s I Have a Dream speech. And I said, if you really, really listen to that speech, it's a very deep speech. It is quite a commentary and, in fact, an indictment about our nation and the promissory note that we have given to certain groups of people that is returning non-sufficient funds. And saying, that's unacceptable. That's unacceptable because the coffers of this nation has to be available for everyone. And in this dream that he says that he has, this dream is that he says he sees the sons and the daughters of slaves and slave owners walking hand in hand together. Let that sink in for a moment. Walking hand in hand together. And I asked the question, do you see your kids walking hand in hand together with the sons and the daughters of the alt-right? Can you imagine the sons and the daughters of Holocaust survivors walking hand in hand with the sons and the daughters of Nazis? Can you imagine this? And if we cannot imagine this, then what is our dream? People say, well, how can I do this? How can I do this? King's dream wasn't him. He didn't say he was walking hand in hand, although I think he might have been willing to. He had a vision of the sons and daughters of the future. What he was saying is, let's take the mortgage off. Let's take the encumbrance off that we have put on ourselves in all the ways that we have treated each other so that future generations can be free. So that future generations can be free to move beyond the history that we've created. The future generations can move beyond and be able to actually experience the oneness that maybe we didn't do before, like I said, in the past, but not keep putting the past up as the precedent for the future. There is a greater yet to be. There's a greater yet to be. But we will never know it if we keep sticking to our precognitive commitments. We are creatures of habit. The thoughts that fire together, wire together. So our whole little neural synapses in our brains keeps getting reinforced and reinforced and reinforced in this notion of the duality. But we can break free from it. We can, but it won't happen unless we do it deliberately. If we do not change where we are going to wind up where we're headed. If we don't change directions, and all it takes is a little trim tab. That's all it takes. You know, Bucky Fuller, Minister Fuller, used to talk about that, the trim tab. This little bitty thing underneath the rudder of the boat that blocks just enough to make things shift, to make things change. I contend that we are in a trim tab moment right now in history. If we have the courage, if we have the willingness to rise above all of the stuff that we have known of what we have already been, and dare to imagine possibilities of what would this world look like. My mentor is Michael Beckwith. I grew up with him and trained under him. Yes, wonderful, wonderful man. One of the founders of the Agape Center in Los Angeles, and I modeled my ministry, Inner Light, after that in Santa Cruz. And he always taught us that pain pushes until vision pulls. Pain pushes until vision pulls. There's a whole lot of pain that's out there that's pushing us, yes. But we're not going to get there until the vision pulls us. See, you can go into recovery, let's just say it's alcohol addiction, by the pain that's pushing you. But just trying not to drink, that's not going to keep you sober. At some point, there has to be a vision of a possibility that is so great you won't trade alcoholism for it. There has to be a vision that we have in our heads of our greater yet to be, of what it could be like if we got beyond the non-duality, if we really accepted that each and every one of us is inherently equal, that each and every one of us has this incredible potentiality within us, that we are connected with the earth made out of its same substance, and that we are here to be guardians and keepers of the earth and each other. If we can have a vision of a possibility that makes us rise above all of the precedents of the past, where we live in possibility consciousness, not probability theory. In the probability theory, all the so-called miracles are lopped off. In the probability theory, all of the things that I am talking about as potentiality are too far away from the standard deviation. You can only deviate so far and still be considered part of the norm. I'm talking about what's natural within us beyond all norms. Beyond all norms. And if you could imagine for a moment 7 billion people on the planet unencumbered by poverty and war and oppression and all of the other things that keep us down. Can you imagine the genius unleashed of 7 billion people? That's our greater yet to be. That is the adventure that I invite us to come into. Dare to see more than what has been. Thank you very much.